Mary Trump, my good friend, look, we lean on you a lot, and we appreciate your willingness to carry the burden of kind of being the, I'll say it, the Donald whisperer, but not in a complimentary way for Donald. But, you've got the clinical training, all kidding aside, the academic training, the professional training, and then you just got some really hard knocks life experience dealing with Donald and others in your family. But, the first question I wanted to ask you, and I know Brian kind of shares this question too, which is, Mary, betrayal is a really tough thing for your uncle, Donald Trump. And I want to know what you think about the fact that just mere feet away from him, this guy, Michael Cohen, the fixer of all things, his kind of 21st century Roy Cohn that Donald always looked to have. This man is now taking the stand, and talk about somebody who hasn't shown any fear. He certainly hasn't been gagged in any way, but Michael Cohen has stood up to Donald in a way that I think we've lacked seeing in other people. So talk about what you think this moment has been for Donald Trump to see and to hear, more importantly, and to experience that evidence that Michael Cohen has been slamming down in this case.
Yeah, well, Katie, first of all, it's great to be here. I love that you're doing this. It's such a great idea. It's such a great format. And Brian, it's really good to see you. It's been a while. I'm just sorry it's under these circumstances. Please make it stop. But here we are. And it's really, it's pretty simple, actually, in terms of what Donald is experiencing. This is somebody, we know this, loyalty is a one-way street, and so too is betrayal. Donald can betray anybody he wants because he is beholden to nobody. And it certainly is not the other way around. So he does not like it. It does not set well with him. He doesn't handle it well when anybody, especially somebody he considers beneath him, because let's face it, Michael Cohen wishes he were Roy Cohn, to stand up, fight back, and give Donald everything that he has coming to him. And of course, it's infinitely worse because Donald just has to sit there and take it. Now, as Brian mentioned earlier, we have all of these surrogates / sycophants out there doing Donald's dirty work for him. And I agree. I think it's without any need to communicate the instructions whatsoever. And we know that that's basically how Donald operates anyway. He never says anything explicitly. He never writes anything down. People just know what their marching orders are. But I think they're also serving another really important function, which unfortunately is good for Donald because it props him up. It feeds him. It feeds his narcissistic need in a way that it hasn't been getting fed because nobody's showing up to protest for him. Yep. These people are serving as an extension of his psyche. He can't talk all day long. He can't fight back. He's got this gag order. He doesn't need to because he has all of these people who are entirely in his power, going off and saying the most egregious things that don't just undermine this trial, they undermine the rule of law. And it's absolutely horrifying because these are members of Congress.
And I would add, too, if I can, Katie, that this is a warning of what another Trump term would look like. I mean, these people, there is no moderating force in the Republican Party. It would just be him doing whatever he wants, and these people will go along with it. As I mentioned before, I mean, Mike Johnson should be diametrically opposed to what's happening right now. Again, we're in a falsifying business records to hide hush money payments for an affair while his wife was at home with their infant son. If anybody should not show up at the courtroom today, it's someone like Mike Johnson. And yet the fact that he's there shows that there is nothing that these people won't sacrifice. There's nothing that these people won't surrender in their groveling deference to this guy. And so if he becomes president again, this is what we can look forward to. And we already have indications based on Project 2025, what he would do, the way he's tried to use to marshal the military to do his bidding. I mean, these people will not stop him from doing anything. There will be no moderating force in the White House. It will be just carte blanche with everybody on board.
And if I can just add to that really quickly, because I think it's a really important point. by doing this, it's not that Mike Johnson and all of these other members of Congress, I think Byron
Donald, yeah.
Thank you. You know, they are not hurting themselves. So you would think that they would be taking themselves, right? But they're Republicans, so they can get away with it. And the people who look to them, you know, the base, they're not thinking, oh, wow, that's hypocritical. They're thinking that they are legitimizing what Donald's saying. They're thinking, well, you know, if Mike Johnson's saying that this is a witch hunt, well, then that gives more credence to it if it's just Donald saying.
Yeah, so a kind of an amalgamation. And for those of you that are tuning in, I want to say thank you for joining our YouTube live stream of Trump on trial inside the courtroom. Big trial, but the last 2 days being very big. Mary Trump here and Brian Tyler Cohen. Mary, you said a couple of things that I jotted down because I thought they were just so important. And Brian, you definitely added to the value too. I want to make sure everybody understands there are no protesters for Donald Trump at this courthouse. I have been at this courthouse almost, for the entirety of this case. There are no protesters, folks. When you go to 100 Center Street, there is a designated First Amendment area. And in that area, there is maybe 10 people there that maybe are flying a Make America Great Again flag. Or wearing some type of Trump MAGA paraphernalia. So I want to put that to bed. And I know some people may say I'm fake news. I'm not lying. There are no protesters there, and there are no physical impediments for supporters of Donald Trump to go to the courthouse. And let's be clear, since day one, since jury selection, since opening statements, there have not been throngs and hordes of people. Number two, you, Mary, said something that just hit the nail on the head. You said that Donald Trump, and Brian said this too, doesn't need to give orders or instructions explicitly to the Johnsons, to the Donalds, to the Rick Scotts, to the Vivek Ramaswamis, because Donald doesn't speak explicitly ever. Isn't that exactly what happened with Michael Cohen? Isn't that exactly how he communicated with Michael Cohen? What you've just said about the fact that these surrogates are doing his dirty work is exactly what he was using Michael Cohen for, and exactly what Michael Cohen got in trouble for, exactly what David Pecker, AMI, and Dylan Howard got in trouble for. All of these other lesser players in this huge theater of fraud are all dispatched by Donald Trump in this way. And the last thing I'll say is you guys also pointed out, if we stop and we think about it, we talk about Project 2025 and what a hellscape it's going to be for America if Donald makes it back into the Oval. But we're now prosecuting conduct that went as far back as when? 2006. And if that's not a sobering thing for us to have to think about in terms of the longevity of the criming and the grift of Donald Trump, I don't know what is. So I guess, Mary, I want to go back to you on this. I mean, there is this ability for Donald Trump to make it all go away. And I'm not saying this lightly as somebody who has practiced law for 24 years and tried hundreds of cases, many of which were criminal. He doesn't have the obligation to take the stand, Mary. But right as rain, if there was one person who could clear up any confusion about Michael Cohen's testimony, Keith Davidson's, right? Any of them, who would that be? And that would be Donald Trump. So, Mary, your estimation as to whether or not you think Donald Trump's going to take the stand?
He's a coward, so I think it's incredibly unlikely. I'm not going to rule it out because he's also a narcissist. And if he feels like he's losing control, he may, he always thinks he's the only person in the room who can do anything right. But he's never testified before. He's often said he would. And I think what we're seeing is that makes it less likely is he's trying to convince anybody who will listen, his base, fellow Republicans, that he can testify because he can't defend himself because of this gag order. So he's obviously lying, but he doesn't care if we believe him or not. He doesn't care if we think it's true or factual or not. He just needs to fool the people that he's been fooling all along. I think that if he does testify, that would be the best indication that we have that, he's completely lost it. I think that there's no way he's a coward, and he knows, because again, it's not just, we're not in a situation where it's just he said, which is how he sets things up. And if we only had Michael Cohen's testimony, that's pretty much what we would be dealing with. Donald's problem is that, one, there's this massive paper trail. But two, some of the most damning witnesses against him have been people who continue to consider him a friend or somebody that they care about. And three, it's that I don't know. I completely lost my train of thought. I'm really sorry. Because there's so many reasons that he shouldn't testify. And I think that if things keep going the way they're going, he never will.
The only thing that may lead me to leave, I also don't think that there's a high possibility or much of any possibility that he's going to testify. But the only thing that leads me to believe that he may is because we have reporting suggesting that he's been telling his attorneys to go harder against Stormy Daniels, for example. And so it makes me feel like he isn't even trying this case for the court. He's trying it for the court of public opinion. And so in that case, if he wants to, if he's kind of given up in the sense that he wants his, that he's going to risk losing the jury in deference to his own attorneys becoming an extension of him and his grievance, then he may very well take the stand to do more of exactly that. So again, that's the only inkling to lead me to believe that he may testify. But if I had to put any money on it, I would also, say that even Donald Trump knows that it would be a disaster in the making for him to testify.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing really quickly, and I figured out what number 3 was. Number 3 is that the person testifying against it right now went to prison for the crime, for a version of the crime. Donald is, it's just so, we're living in deeply absurd times, and they're terrifying. But I think that if he were to get to the point where he tells his attorneys that he wants to testify, they're going to find an elephant tranquilizer.
It is funny that these people that the Trump team can point to Michael Cohen as a criminal and say, how can you actually trust this criminal over here? Right. But the reason that he's a criminal, the reason that he was convicted, is because he was covering for Donald Trump for this very crime that Trump himself facilitated.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Kate. I just want to say really quickly, let's not forget, Donald didn't cut Michael Cohen loose because he committed a crime.
Oh, yeah.
The crime was committed on his behalf. He cut him loose because he didn't need him anymore. And he didn't want to take him to Washington, D.C., just as Michael Cohen turned on Donald because he got this crime hung around his neck, and Donald Trump didn't take him to Washington, D.C.
He was the perfect patsy, right? I mean, he used him and he jettisoned him as he went to the White House.